There's a moment when all the noise fades, and what's left is shame. Not because you did something wrong, but because you did nothing at all. Stay with me here, because by the end of this, you'll understand why Carl Jung believed your undisciplined self isn't lazy, it's exiled. And it's been begging to come home. We don't really talk about what it does to a person, watching themselves break the same promise every single day. Telling yourself, I'll start tomorrow, while knowing full well that tomorrow never comes. Walking past a mirror and feeling a strange resentment toward your own reflection, not because you hate yourself, but because you don't believe yourself anymore. You tell yourself you'll change. You even believe it, for a few hours. But then the next morning comes, and the man who made that vow is gone, replaced by the same tired face, scrolling again, running again, hiding again. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." But what if avoiding discipline is exactly that, not just procrastination, but a spiritual rejection of your future self? That's where we begin. Because what if I told you, the version of you who's tired, unfocused, easily distracted, that's not who you are. That's just who you've rehearsed. And if something in you is already stirring right now, don't just listen. This channel exists for the parts of you nobody else speaks to. You've been taught to think discipline is about effort. But it's not. Discipline isn't effort, it's identity. And you'll never truly become disciplined until you stop seeing yourself as someone who needs to become disciplined. That might sound strange, but once you get it, the war you've been fighting every morning will finally make sense. See, Jung believed most people never become who they are, not because they don't try, but because they stay strangers to their own potential. They chase change like it's something out there, new job, new environment, new system, new motivation video. But the truth is, you don't need more. You need less. Less escape. Less noise. Less hiding from the one thing you feared most, responsibility. Not responsibility to others, not to your boss, not to your parents, but responsibility to your becoming. The sacred contract between who you are and who you were meant to be. This is where discipline lives. Not in checklists, not in 5 a.m. alarms, but in devotion. Think about it. When have you felt most alive? It wasn't during pleasure. It wasn't while resting. It was when you were aligned. When you kept your word. When you surprised yourself by doing what you once thought you couldn't. That feeling wasn't just pride, it was integrity. And Jung would tell you, that's not a coincidence. The psyche wants unity. It wants to integrate. The more fragmented you are, saying one thing, doing another, the more your subconscious rebels. You feel resistance, not because you're lazy, but because your mind is rejecting the fraud you're pretending to be. This is what most people miss. Lack of discipline isn't the disease, it's the symptom. The symptom of a split soul. One half of you makes goals, the other half breaks them. One side wants to build, the other wants to disappear. And every day you repeat that cycle, you're not just wasting time, you're deepening the split. Carl Jung warned about this. He believed what you resist persists. The parts of yourself you abandon don't die, they wait. They become your shadow. And in that shadow isn't just your dark or broken side, it's also your disciplined side, your ambitious side, the structured, powerful version of you that you've locked away. And here's the twist, that's what you're actually afraid of, isn't it? Not your weakness. Your strength. Because if you actually became disciplined, you'd run out of excuses. You couldn't hide behind potential anymore. You'd have to live as proof. And that's terrifying, because once you become proof, there's no turning back. The truth is, you're already dying. Every time you betray your own schedule, abandon your priorities, hit snooze, or trade your promise for cheap dopamine. You're not tired because of work, you're tired because of guilt. Deep down, you know this isn't who you were meant to be. So hear this, not just with your ears, but with your bones. Discipline isn't something you add to your life. Discipline is the soul's immune system. It protects you from decay, from regret, from becoming a man who has everything except himself. There was a time you wanted this, before the distractions, before the burnout, before you lost faith in yourself. And your spirit hasn't forgotten. It's been waiting patiently for you to return to that sacred fire, to the forge where discipline was born in you. We'll get there. We'll relight it. But not yet. First, we have to uncover the root, where your undisciplined self began. Why you resist structure. And how Jung's theory of archetypes can expose the buried identity that's been sabotaging every effort you've made. Because you didn't become undisciplined by accident. You were trained. Not by one moment, but by thousands of small betrayals, some from the world, some from yourself. And somewhere along the line, you started telling yourself a story, that you're the kind of person who almost does it. Someone who nearly changes. Someone whose potential never quite arrives. But that story isn't you. It's a survival mask. A mask built out of fear, rejection, abandonment, and the wounds no one noticed. And over time, you began to believe the mask was your identity. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So let's make it conscious. Let's go back, not to relive, but to understand." Do you remember the first time discipline was punished in you? Maybe you spoke up and were silenced. Maybe you got excited about something and were mocked. Maybe you built something, took pride in it, only to have someone tear it down like it was nothing. That's how the fracture begins, not from laziness, but from pain. And here's the irony, the disciplined part of you is also the most vulnerable. Because discipline requires belief, faith in your own power. And when that faith is shattered early, discipline goes into hiding. Jung called this the repression of the noble archetype, the king, the warrior, the architect of order and control. This is the part of your psyche that wants to build empires, lead yourself, master time and energy. It's still there, but after years of quiet defeats, it's been twisted. Instead of standing tall, it lurks in the shadows, waiting for you to claim it again. So every time you try to start something, a habit, a morning routine, a diet, a deep work sprint, you're not starting from zero. You're confronting every ghost who ever told you. You won't follow through. You never finish. You're not that kind of person. Unless you understand this, you'll keep sabotaging yourself, not because you want to fail, but because part of you still believes you must. Here's the truth Jung left us with. Your outer failures are rarely about effort, they're about identity. You can't outwork a self-image that contradicts what you're trying to become. You'll always return to the man you believe you are, no matter how many tools or systems you try. So how do we change that belief? Not with hype. Not with empty affirmations. With integration. Imagine two men living inside you. One wants power, legacy, structure. He's focused, calm, sovereign, keeps his word even when no one's watching. The other wants ease, comfort, disappearance. He avoids risk, failure, intensity. He seeks warmth, not victory. These two men aren't enemies. They're split versions of you. And as long as you reject one, you'll never be whole. Stop trying to kill the lazy version of yourself. Reclaim him. Speak to him. Ask him, "What are you protecting me from?" Because I promise you, the lazy part of you isn't trying to ruin your life. He's trying to protect you from pain, from disappointment, from the memory of being mocked, abandoned, misunderstood. And when you see this, discipline stops being a war. It becomes a return to the throne you abandoned, to the center of your psyche where the king archetype sits, watching and waiting. Not to dominate, but to stabilize. Jung knew every man must eventually meet his inner king. When he does, he stops performing, stops chasing permission, begins to organize his life, not to impress others, but to reflect the inner order he's restored. That's what discipline really is, psychological architecture. The outer reflection of internal order. Without it, a man doesn't just lose productivity, he loses identity. And that's why undisciplined men feel shame even when no one's watching. It's not about what they did or didn't do, it's about who they're afraid they're becoming. The fractured self is a haunted place. Unless you reintegrate the lost archetypes, the builder, the warrior, the father, the guide, you'll keep reaching for motivation that never arrives. You'll keep thinking you need more willpower when what you actually need is wholeness. Because here's the truth, you were never meant to rely on motivation. You were meant to remember. To wake up and walk through your day as a man who's already decided. This is who I am. This is what I do. This is the order I bring. Yes, it'll hurt. Yes, you'll fail. But failure won't define you anymore, because identity comes first. Once your identity changes, your behavior follows. If you're still here, you already feel it. A part of you is waking up. Not the hyped-up overachiever, but the ancient part. The structured, calm, relentless part. The one who doesn't scream, he builds. But here's something you need to hear. You can't fully reclaim discipline until you forgive yourself for the years you lost. This isn't about punishment or regret, it's about maturity. The immature man says, I'm broken, I must be fixed. The mature man says, I am whole, I must be remembered. Remember this, there was never anything wrong with you. You just forgot who you were. And every time you choose structure over chaos, presence over distraction, action over hesitation, you're not becoming someone new. You're returning. You're returning to the man your younger self needed. The man your older self will thank you for. Jung believed the greatest work of your life isn't success, it's individuation. Becoming whole. Uniting the fragmented parts of yourself into one living truth. And discipline, it's the path to that truth. It's how you prove to your unconscious that you are safe, that you are in control, that the king has returned to the throne. So I'll leave you with this question: what would your life look like if you stopped living as a reaction and started living as a declaration? Because the journey isn't over. Next, we'll talk about time, about death, about the war that continues when you avoid order, and the quiet, unshakable strength that begins when you stop waiting to feel ready and start acting like you were born to lead. Time doesn't just pass, it accumulates. Every minute you delay discipline becomes part of the architecture of your life. Not just as a missed opportunity, but as a brick in the structure of regret. You don't just lose time, you become shaped by the loss. Carl Jung once said, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." That line should haunt you, not because it's harsh, but because it's the most honest mirror you'll ever face. You don't need to be convinced of who you are, you're already proving it every single day. Most people never notice the exact moment they drift. They just wake up 10 years later and realize the man they've become isn't the man they admire. He's a version shaped by hesitation, delay, and fear disguised as wisdom. You weren't born lazy. You were trained to mistrust your own power. And over time, you dulled the edge of your ambition so it wouldn't threaten anyone, not even yourself. Because real discipline, it changes the room. It's not loud, but it carries weight. And that weight unsettles people who haven't risen yet. That's why you started hiding. That's why you let go. You wanted to stay close to people who were still sleeping, because waking up meant walking alone. But what if that loneliness was never a punishment? What if it was a passage? Here's something most men never realize until it's too late. Every time you betray your potential to stay comfortable, you're practicing death. Not physical death, spiritual erosion. The slow fading of fire. The quiet resignation of a man who once had hunger in his eyes, but now only has excuses. Jung didn't believe we find meaning by chasing happiness. He believed we find it through confrontation, by looking the dragon in the eyes. Facing chaos, failure, and pain, and walking into it willingly. Discipline is your sword in that confrontation. It doesn't erase fear. It gives you something stronger than fear. Direction. See, every man is disciplined. The only question is to what? Some are disciplined to distraction. Others to addiction. some to the voices of doubt they inherited. But few are disciplined to their own becoming. If you want to be one of them, you must understand, discipline isn't a phase, and it's not a grind. It's a way of relating to time. Every time you choose what feels good now instead of what builds you later, you're telling time, I don't respect you. And time, like any sacred force, will move against you. That's when you start to feel late. Stuck. Slipping. But once you realign, once you live with reverence for time, your days change. Not externally at first, but internally. You feel carried by rhythm, by purpose, by the calm that comes when life is no longer a reaction, but a ritual. At the highest level, discipline stops being willpower. It becomes ritual, a sacred rhythm between you and the future you've sworn to build. You wake up not because you have to, but because you get to meet your oath again. You train not to punish yourself, but to remember yourself. You eat clean, not for vanity, but because your body is the temple of your resolve. Everything begins to echo your truth. One day, the man you once dreamed of becoming isn't a vision, he's your reflection. But here's the part most people miss. This won't happen in a week, or from a single breakthrough. Discipline isn't built through hype, it's built through grief. Because to become the man you're meant to be, you have to let the other one die. The one who broke his own word. The one who hid behind. Someday. And when you grieve that version, not with shame, but with honor, you free the energy you've been using to pretend. With that energy you build. Mornings with clarity. Routines that ground you. A schedule that doesn't trap you, but liberates you. Order isn't your enemy, it's your armor. And in a chaotic world, a calm, structured man is rare and valuable. That man can be you. And it starts now, not next Monday, not after one more failure, now. This moment. This breath. This heartbeat. This uncomfortable truth inside you, it's your initiation. You don't need another reason. You don't need to feel ready. You are already worthy of discipline, you've just forgotten. Jung believed wholeness isn't about adding more, it's about embracing all of who you are. Even the parts you've avoided. Even the ones that looked lazy or chaotic. You're not here to escape them, you're here to lead them. And when your inner house is in order, you won't just feel powerful, you'll feel at peace. Because real discipline isn't loud. It doesn't scream. It doesn't beg to be seen. It walks quietly, every day, like a man who finally remembers why he's here. So return to your vow. Not tomorrow. Now. Because once you do, you'll never avoid discipline again, not because you have to, but because you finally know what it feels like to be a man who keeps his word to himself.